Welcome back. My name is John, and this is the Dewey Podmonster podcast. This is your weekly podcast and the original podcast about consumption. With me is the host of the Dewey Podmonster podcast. His name is Sean, and we have a special guest this week, John Isberg. He's the director of Final Summer, and we're quite honored to have you with us. John, how are you doing tonight?
Good. Thanks for having me. Yeah, it's been a long day. I had a long shoot running around a massive warehouse. So it's nice to sit down and talk to you. Thanks for having me.
Are we allowed to ask what you're working on, or is that something that's under top secret right now?
Just a commercial shoot.
Okay.
Lots of Dan and Dolly stuff today.
Well, gotta do what you got to do between stuff, right? I don't want to hide the main attraction too much, so we wanted to bring you on to get a chance to talk about Final Summer. So for those listening or those watching that haven't seen it, we did a full episode review on the film Final Summer in October a couple weeks ago. We were both fans of it, and John, since you're the director, why don't you give us a little quick crash course on what Final Summer is about, and then we'll kind of go from there with it.
Sure. Yeah, Final Summer, to me, I wanted to make a film that felt like a forgotten slasher franchise film from the 80s. And so I really went back to the early 80s. And a lot of the slasher films that I kind of grew up on, or that more accurately, I had like two older cousins that would like watch these movies and I would hear about it. I wanted to make a slasher film that was kind of a really fun roller coaster ride mixed with kind of like what you would really do if you were in a slasher film, So kind of a lot of the humor that comes from that situation, but then also the reality of that kind of a thing. Originally, we were going to do like this like kind of creature feature thing where like there's a car breaks down in the woods and there's something in the mist or whatever. But then I don't know if you ever saw that movie Monster. It was basically that. It was like a mom and her daughter are stuck in this car. Yeah. And when I saw that, I was like, yeah, we probably should do that. But and it was just about like I always go back to like. What are the things that you have around you that you can make a movie with? And I started to see all these summer camps around. I'm like, well, I love summer camp slashers. And that's a one. Mm-hmm. I was stupid and I thought that was a one location film, but it's like, one camp with like hundreds of acres and like 87 different locations in it. But it kind of grew out of that, I guess. I went through like 19 drafts of the script and, I would go to the camp all the time to just scout and think about shots and, places in the camp that kind of talked to me a little bit, like the pool that kind of jumped out and the kitchen and the bridges. And it was really just about finding like what we had and trying to make a film from that, And so that was kind of where it came from. And I was like, well, how hard could that be? And then it was like the hardest thing I've ever done, basically.
So you mentioned, some of the influences for this movie being like camp slashers and stuff like that. And one of those things that I noticed, I picked up on right away because it's right at the beginning of the movie. It's when we meet the main character, Warren Copper. And there's a shot that feels very much so like it's almost shot for shot like a remake of Jason's introduction in the Friday the 13th remake.
Oh, it's yeah.
Is that intentional or was that just like...
Okay. Yeah. So, well, I loved the cinematography of that one. And recently, like I started following Daniel Pearl on Instagram or whatever, and I just kind of shouted out about like Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and then he like retweeted. I was like, oh my god! But like, and then we kind of talked on the side or whatever. But I totally forgot that he shot, that reboot of Friday the 13th, and I love the look of the film a lot because it, I think it was anamorphic and it had that great. To me, it was kind of hilarious to think about you're in the forest, but somehow there's lens flare in it, and so it was,
yeah.
And so I kind of did that as a nod to him, and then also that shot was very much a kind of a nod to Daniel Pearl, and so it's. People are like, oh, you rip off of whatever, but it's like, I think we wear our influences. We have to start somewhere, I think, and it's like people always say like. Was it some people borrow and like, whatever steals and stuff. But I think that's where as you're finding your voice, you kind of have to pull from the things that And I think, those films, like, I don't know how many times I got in a conversation with someone about that shot in Halloween when, Michael Myers comes out of the shadows behind her.
Yeah.
And even there, I was watching something recently with like Dean Cundy, and he was talking about that shot where they would turn the lamp up a little bit, so then I would just come into that. Oh, it's just so iconic, And so I think like I don't know. I love cinematography a lot, so I think that his kind of take on the Friday the 13th to me was probably the most beautiful and cool looking of the Friday the 13th, because I don't know, like the first Friday the 13th, it's like when it gets to night, it's like they're in a black box, like when they're fighting on the beach and everything. It's like, dude, could you not throw a light like behind her or something just in the back?
Mm-hmm.
But I get it. They were, working with like, film stock, and we have digital, which is totally different. But yeah, no, I definitely loved the look of that. And then that was also like something we wanted to do, was make the night forest like feel like you could see more of the night, to feel. We kind of wanted the audience to feel like you were at the camp with them and like you were in the forest.
The movie, you can tell, obviously has influences and wears a lot of those on its sleeve, but were there, you went to the camp and you had all these different locations. Were there things that you hadn't really planned on, or shots that you didn't plan on, that when you got to the location, just something inspired you to say, no, we gotta add something at this location because it really fits the story that you're trying to tell?
Oh yeah, totally. Yeah, there was, like for one specifically was fun because I kept going through it and I was like, man, this place is so cool. And it was this the pool house where like Peter whacks the killer in the face with the pool noodle, because I loved the tile in there. It was kind of creepy, it just had this like kind of old school 80s like 70s kind of pool house tile thing going on. And then there was all these noodles, because really it was just supposed to play out where like Peter runs off into the distance. But I was like, it'd be really funny as if like, because to go back to like, what would you do if you're really in a slasher film? And I felt like if you're running through, like you are panicking and you're grabbing at any last thing. And so you're not thinking straight. And so I thought it'd be really funny if like Peter's getting chased in there and he like falls and he grabs for something and he just hits him with the pool noodle. And I thought of my cousins too and how they thought that would really be funny. So we put that in there because I love that just that place. And I think, it was just one of those things where like it was probably the day or two before we shot it. I was like, that's really cool looking in there. We should go in there. And so we did that. And it was funny because that was probably the easiest to edit, where a lot of what we do kind of earlier on was we'd shoot things kind of methodically, where we get our wide shot and we cut in for our coverage and all this kind of stuff. But for that one, I was just kind of on my easy rig, just following the action, and then I'd do it from the opposite, and then we get some inserts. And that was a very easy scene to shoot. It was probably the easiest one we did, but it was just a lot of fun. And then there were just other places that really spoke to me. Like the kitchen was really cool. I remember the first time I went there in the winter to scout with my son, and I had him stand in like this clearing where the killer is. So like there's this wide shot where you see them all walk out to see the killer there. And I just had my son sounds weird, stand out there in the clearing. I was like, oh man, I could see like with the trees and everything and how I could see them all walking out. And then I just got this idea, it'd be so funny if like, they think it's like just somebody screwing with them. And so like you got the guy going out there like yelling, like, where the hell you been? Like we've been looking for you, dumbass, or whatever. And so I think things like that. And then I think there was a couple times where we intentionally I wanted to just mess with the audience. So when Lexi goes to her cabin, I was like, what do you think is going to piss the audience off more, if we leave the door open or if we shut it? So we all kind of agreed that we should leave the door open to make everybody nuts. And so, because, it's like, as a slasher fan, as a horror fan, sometimes like half of the fun of these films is like, go! What?
Right.
Like, why? Like, you got it perfectly. I mean, I still can't get over Halloween Ends, how like, Karen gets him on the stairs with the pitchfork and then just drops it. I'm like, double tap. I mean?
Yeah.
Like you go to Zombieland, I think that's what's so funny about Zombieland when it came out, is because it took the tropes and it spun it. But,
I think horror's at its best when it takes tropes and kind of plays with them. Like we all know that we all have an expectation that when you're getting chased by the bad guy, that something dumb is going to happen. Like you should be getting into the running car and driving away and never coming back. But I'm going to go back to save my cat or something like that. So.
Oh my God. Yeah. Oh my God. The alien. Yeah. That was the funniest thing. Cause I was always, I heard save the cat forever as a story kind of clock kind of thing. And then it was only recently when I was like, oh, that's from Alien. I'm like, oh my God, that's right. Like she literally, Ripley's so smart and cool and everything that she goes to save her damn cat,
Right.
which never really seemed to bother me that much until you realize it's like, oh, because the movie needed to happen a little bit longer than it was happening. So
That cat's the biggest asshole in that whole movie.
oh
too.
my God, Jonesy. I mean, Harry Dean Stanton dies because of that stupid cat. It's
The
sad,
cat gets more jump scares than the xenomorph does, I think, in that entire movie.
Oh, and the cat lives. I mean, he's in the aliens. He stays back. The Marines all die. Hudson dies, but no, the cat lives. It's that bastard cat, man. It sucks.
And that's why cats are fucking evil.
No, it was cool. I think that the location definitely, I think, it influenced a lot. And then definitely the pool scene. I think I always thought it would be kind of fun to have it kind of end in this place. Of course, then it was like when we got to the camp, the pool was half drained, and so I had a panic attack because I was like, that's literally our, like, I went to the camp like a week before and everything was cool, and then I got there like the week later and it was halfway empty, and I was like losing my mind. I'm like, that's the end of our film. And so their compromise was, they just, because it had a leak in it, they just threw a hose in and let it run the entire time that we were at the camp. And it wasn't like, warm water. It was just pure tap.
Yeah, no.
So I think I was.
I wouldn't expect it to be warm water. That would be too convenient.
And then you get there and your major plot device is effectively gone.
Oh my God. Oh yeah. I was trying to think of how we could rewrite the ending if we had to. And I was like, I can't really think of it better. I'm just freaking out now. But then we finally got it, but it was so cold. I was like having hypothermia, I think, while we were filming the ending or whatever, because I was just in there with the cast or whatever. And the first take we did was great, but all of the crew wanted to see the shot because we were shooting in like a 360. So every time I got it, like the first take was my favorite, but every crew person was like in a shot, like in it. And I was like losing my mind. So we got the second take when I was frozen.
I don't think I've ever heard of a movie shoot involving water where people said the water was like a good temperature. Like anytime I hear about water being used in a movie, it always sounds like everyone's just miserable because of how cold everything is.
Oh yeah, like Waterworld, and what's the other one? The Abyss,
Return of the Living Dead has the big rain scene in the cemetery, which I guess was just terrible.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, there's no water in the second one, I don't think. So yeah, pretty sure I didn't write any water scenes in that one.
So we mentioned that a lot of the influences on this movie are some of them are kind of like worn on its sleeve, and that's to its credit. But like we noticed right off the bat, like movies like Friday the 13th, Sleepaway Camp, and The Burning, and your big camp slashers. Are there some movies that might have influenced it that we might have overlooked or not have been so obvious?
Oh yeah, I think some of them were probably more subconscious, because when I would watch the movies later, I was like, oh wow, I didn't even think about that, And I think I think that these movies become such a part of, like your kind of language when you're thinking about horror. I think sometimes like I didn't even think about when we did there's like this door scene where like the killer kills Ronnie and how we shot it. I just remember, oh, we gotta get the shot of the feet. And then recently I watched like Halloween back to back with Final Summer, like on my projector, and when they get to the part where he kills like the boyfriend and just seeing his feet on the. So I think there's like a common language, I think, in a lot of horror films. And when you've seen so many horror films, I think you kind of are like, oh yeah, I'm gonna go to that scene, or not even you thinking of that, you're just thinking of the shot because it just feels natural, it feels right, and then you realize later on, oh, it's from this. So I think like Prom Night had some interesting things just with the killer. I think with just the look and the feel, it wasn't like a big killer, so I think like the size of the killer, the fact that he wore a mask and the axe and everything was kind of, it felt really at home. I feel like My Bloody Valentine had a bit in there. I think The Burning Madman was a big influence on the campfire scene, I think, and also obviously like Friday the 13th part, was it 2? I think, right? Yeah, 2, where they're at the thing. But I don't know. There's just a lot in there. And then I think I thought a lot about Scream, mainly with like, because the stuff I went through, like I was in this pretty abusive relationship with someone who ended up being like a total sociopath, like a whatever, antisocial personality sort of kind of person. And so it was pretty terrifying. But I kind of took a lot of like what I went through and put that into the film. And and it kind of helped me to inform the villain a bit, and then also things that they would do, because I saw so much of that like malignant narcissistic behavior or whatever, where they're always like gaslighting you and stuff, and they're so full of themselves or whatever in a way. And so I thought it'd be really fun. Some of the humor I think comes from a dark place of having lived through that shit, where it's like I go back to like with Scream, like if Billy was really a psychopath, he would have killed Stu eventually, because it's the person that knows what's going on,
You could argue that he tries to in the movie.
That's true. Yeah. And so I felt like for me, it was funny because someone was like, well, like Linnea doesn't give her big plan away at the end of the film. And one, I was like, well, that would probably never happen in real life. And if they said anything at all, it would just be to gaslight you. So they've mixed truth and lies. But two, she kind of starts it, but then she's interrupted by Mike. And I think that pisses off her like narcissism. I would say Alien was a big one on the structure, because I studied the structure of Alien a lot for how to do the structure for this film. And, it does take some time getting there to that final, and
sure.
When Harry Stanton goes to get Jones, that's kind of like the midpoint right there, really.
Well, it's also kind of like, with comedy, they say when sometimes comedians, they tell like the same jokes in parallel. In a way, it's kind of like you're saying this common language with horror. It's kind of the same thing. Multiple people can come up with ideas that are similar, but, I digress. I don't even know if I had a point with saying that. I felt like being scholarly with my comedy knowledge or something.
No, I think you bring up a good point, because it's like we kind of have to take these things and make it our own, because because I always, like from the beginning, I was like, well, what's the point of making this film? Because there's like there were like 1,919 like slasher films on Amazon. Oh, wow. So I was like, what's going to make this any different? And so I kind of felt like, well, I think taking it from the point of view of like my own experience and putting that into like the character of Lexi and then into the character of Warren Copper, because I feel like those two characters are really me at different points in that whole thing. Like I feel like I was very close to Lexi when I was coming out of all that stuff, and so I had like really bad PTSD for a long time, and then I feel like now I'm much more like Warren Copper, where like, if something triggers me, I'll go into that place a bit, but I can see it in a different perspective now. And even like my dad was a paramedic for 35 years, and so he had PTSD pretty bad from all the stuff that he saw. And so there are nods to like his stuff too, because he wanted to be a forest ranger. He always tells, like the Smokey the Bear stuff. And so I kind of threw that story in kind of as a nod to my dad, because I thought it'd be funny if, because you take the classic slasher campfire story, but then you spin it and it's really just a Smokey the Bear story. It's not a slasher story. It's basically just like, I'm just thinking of like the like if you're telling this to like your campers, you're scaring the crap out of them, so they'll make sure to have like good fire safety, is the gag, really. And it's just so it's just kind of funny. But I think you're right, though. It's like you have to kind of take them and make them your own thing. And I feel like in some ways that kind of bit me a little bit on this first one. And I feel like that's where I can see with the second one that we're going to make is like making it much more its own thing, making it more like, it'll be nice to not go so much into like, oh, let's revisit like this psychopathic bullshit I went through for part two. And so I think for the next one, it'll be
just
nice.
Good to leave that stuff in the past.
It is, which is interesting, because that's basically a huge theme for part two is, leaving the past in the past or whatever. But I think that's I think the exciting thing for me is just having been able to listen to a lot of the feedback from different people talking about the first one. And, I don't think I want to make another film so in the shadow of other films, but yeah, that's kind of me right now. So,
well, it seems too like when you get, the first movie is always the one that you kind of plant the initial idea, and then two is where, where you start to really amplify or start to magnify everything. I mean, we think of a movie that John and I have talked about recently is like Terrifier, right? The first Terrifier comes out, it's not, and now it seems like it's just has, the world by the balls, but because everybody seems to
Sean really hates that
I don't
he's
like
making
clowns,
this comparison, by the way. So
that won't be news to anyone. But the first one lays the groundwork, and there's not really much of a story to it. But when you get to the second one, and not inferring that about this movie, but you get to the second one, and that's where everything just starts to. They've given you the main character, the main bad guy, the main villain, the people what you're watching the movie for, and then they start to expound on that. They start to build on that, and that's where that idea it kind of forges itself. It gets a little stronger.
Yeah.
And
Well, totally. I think it's interesting because I feel like, because I kind of thought of it as like, well, as Final Summer, if it was like a slasher trilogy franchise kind of thing. So the first one is really about fight or flight. And I think the interesting thing I find is like, and some films have proven, I was watching The Gray recently and I was like, well, what is it about this film that gives you the sense that there's all these characters in this film? It's an ensemble film, but you kind of get the chance to know, except for the people that kind of die immediately in the crash, there are other people you start to get to know, And so I'm like, what is it about it? And sometimes it's really as simple as like a throwaway line, like that guy's talking about, like, I can't die without, having sex one more time because like I can't die out of that terrible, the last partner he was with, which is really funny. But like, I think those little beats like give you as an audience a chance to like, even like for us, one line, get to like or know someone a little bit more than you do. And so I feel like that's something I was thinking about for part 2 is like, okay, that's kind of what it takes, I think, for an audience to like at least feel something for even like your supporting characters or whatever. But then, and then also I think just the sense that the film was such a kind of a roller coaster from the time the killer shows up, it's kind of run into the end. I feel like the way I kind of wrote it and planned it, I feel like it kind of limited the ability to kind of have some of that exposition, have some of that character beats. And there were some in there, but I think that's where I think with part 2, it's like extended it for like a couple of days. So it's like instead of like one night only, it's like leading up to a thing. And so that's where I feel like there's probably a better chance for character development in the second one. And then also like, like to go to like the problems sequels, it's like, I feel like it was funny because I just kind of cracked, like I had the story for a long time, but it would go off in these like needlessly complicated, overly complicated, and you really see the problems of sequels, where it's like, oh my God, all of a sudden I have like 13 people, 3 bad guys. What the hell is this? And so I went back and I looked at like Halloween Ends, and I remember thinking of all the criticism of that was like, well, if he would have just been in Kills, maybe we would have felt differently about Corey showing up in part 3, but I don't know that David Gordon Green ever thinks that far ahead,
I still think they could have saved that whole movie with one shot at the end showing this Silver Shamrock building, and that would have saved that entire movie.
Oh, so completely.
Yeah, would have made the whole thing make sense, but they didn't do that. So
so I kind of
we're the few people that actually like that movie. So
yeah, I like Halloween too, but I guess I look back at the first one. I was like, okay, like everything that is in the first one needs to be addressed in part 2 because there's so much we don't know about the characters. And this was kind of something I thought about early on too, was like when I was with this person, it was like just when I thought I would solve because there were so many like crazy things happening all the time and so many things that you couldn't make sense of or whatever. And then you think you would find out, you're like, oh, I've figured out what it is. And then you realize you're looking at like one, instead of like you've solved the puzzle, it's like you realize you're looking at one side of like a Rubik's Cube. And so there's like, oh, I didn't even see this over here. This is crazy. Like, what is this over here? Who is that guy? So it was all this stuff. And so I remember thinking that there are these pieces that are happening in the film. There's stuff that's like, there's some papers that are being burned. There's some documents that are showing up here and there. There's elements of this bigger plan. And so I feel like as we're with Lexi for a lot of it, or these main characters, there's all these pieces that are happening. And that was kind of what I wanted the audience to feel like. Now I realize it's like I should probably give people more to think about. But you don't know when it's your first film, And
it's got to be super tough. That's another thing I was going to ask is like how many like unseen things just pop up that there's no way you could even plan for it. There's got to be a gazillion things that just come out of the blue that you plan, you do the best you can, you storyboard, you do all the thing, you set up your story, you have all your locations scouted like you said earlier. You find a cool place, you decide to do that. But how many like unseen issues come up with making a film where you've done cinematography in the past, but this is your first like big crack at a feature, right? So it's got to be just mind-numbingly difficult to even think ahead to be able to plan for stuff like that.
Oh yeah, it's funny because I think the funniest thing about it is like you go through all of this, and one of my friends told me early on, he's like, a completed film is a miracle, and it's like your film is hanging by a thread and it can fall apart at any point in time. And I used to joke, but I totally believe this is true, is like when I would go to Walmart and I'd see like the $5 bin DVDs. I'm like, that's a $5 bin of miracles that, Sharknado, that's a miracle. Bird, that's a miracle. All this stuff. The Room, that's a freaking miracle. And there's so many. And I think one of my friends, Rob Stern, he's a cinematographer and a really good mentor to me. And he's moved to Champaign and he shot a bunch of films for Shudder. We just did a workshop at my house like a week ago on diffusion, and all film is not anymore. It's just problem solving, I think. But he kind of said something that really struck me. He's like, is this a situation or is this a problem? And so if it's a problem, then how do we deal with it? And if it's a situation, that's just what it is, And so I think for me, there were days when it was like just a situation. Like my sound guy quit. Like right before we were supposed to do the scene where like Moose gets attacked in the cabin, so Moose and Georgia were supposed to fight and it was supposed to be this great scene where like Moose and the killer are struggling, and then the light. So the lamp that falls on the ground was supposed to start getting kicked around. And so it was going to play like on George's face, and you were going to see this hard shadow on the walls of like the killer, like kind of trying to kill Moose and Moose fighting back. And it's supposed to all play out where like they're kind of in the foreground out of focus. And you're just seeing the whole fight happen on George's face. But then the sound guy quit. And so instantly I'm like, what?
Well, I guess I have something else to focus on.
Like, oh, yeah. Or like, I went to do the pool scene with like Lexi and Georgia. And then this friend of mine like told me, he's like I'm walking, because he had a problem with like the shoot schedule. And then the next day I woke up and he had fired an email off to the entire cast and crew telling everybody to walk. And so I was like dealing with all these, putting out fires all the time. And then 4 days before we went to start, like we had these equity investors that basically had tried to steal the film from us. And so I had to turn down, because they were throwing like 50 grand. And so I told them I couldn't take their money, and we just made it without them. But that caused a lot of stress too. And so it was just a lot of, and it was, everybody that worked on the film, this was their first film they'd ever worked on. So, and most of them came out of my workshop. So prior to this, we would go and we would do like night forest exterior exercises where we'd learn what it was like. Cause I've done some overnights. I was on a film called Slice, and it's tough, like night lighting sucks, because you have to know what you're doing, because there's so many variables of like, you don't want it to look lit, is the thing. And so it was, incredible crew. The fact that we pulled off what we did with college kids on their first movie ever, it's like, to me, like that's the biggest miracle. I don't really care. Like if I get a bad review, I'm like, oh, that's amazing, because we shouldn't even be here. You know what I mean? So I think it's just the tenacity to get through it. There's so many different things, but I think you're just naive enough to make your first film. And then you realize you just dug like a big hole for yourself. And now you spend the rest of your time trying to get out of your hole, And so it was, I'll say the first 2 days were like 8 to 8. And then we went into this splits of 2 to 2, where you start at 2 in the afternoon, you wrap at 2 in the morning. And that first night when we shifted that was like when it got real for everybody. Because it was like we were trying to make a 1980s studio film with like no money, with people who have never done night lighting before. So that was the first kind of real gut check, I think, for everybody in the film, where they were like, wow, like this sucks. So it's a miracle, I think, that we're here at all.
So the question is, why put yourself through that again? Like you just got to love it, right? It's got to be something that you just feel like you have to do, like a calling almost.
Oh, 100%. Oh yeah, 100%. Because I think like it's so you realize like, I feel like I grew up on like visions of Spielberg and stuff, but then I got really brought into it by listening to stories of Kevin Smith and Robert Rodriguez and stuff. And now it's like, it's so hard, I think, to have those kinds of careers anymore, because with streaming, it's like, man, like, where do you get money for your next film? And the reality, I think, is like, it's just like crowdfunding is such a key part of it too. And God bless like the horror fans and the horror community, because I don't know how anyone would make any other films, because I feel like that at least is a passionate fan base who will give a filmmaker a shot, versus like, making a drama or something else. It's like, you're basically screwed from day one that you wrote that, like, comedy.
Well, it helps with horror too, that like so many of us, and I'm not saying that Final Summer has bad performances. In fact, we
No.
praise the performances in
Okay.
Final Summer, but so many horror movies we like because of the cheesiness and the questionable performances and all that stuff. It's almost like a spot where you can go to see people kind of learning how to do whatever they're going to do going forward. So
100%. I mean, I go back. I'm always inspired by like Sam Raimi, because he did Within the Woods, which turned into Evil Dead, which he went back with some more money, made Evil Dead 2. But then, I mean, if you would have looked at like Within the Woods, would you have ever thought like Spider-Man 2 is going to come out of that guy? You know what I mean? Or like Darkman, which is probably one of my favorites that he's done, you know, or Simple Plan even, you know. And so I think like that to me is so inspiring, because I feel like, and I think horror is really actually challenging because, one, you have like this audience that is like probably the most tough audience, you know, and so that's really interesting. That's can be very intimidating, but also I think there is so much visual storytelling in a horror film that it doesn't happen in a drama per se, where you like, oh shit, I didn't get the insert of like the door handle. Is the audience going to know like that the door is locked or some, you know, or shit, like when did he grab the axe, or, you know, like all this kind of stuff. So like you need to be on top of all of your shots and your coverage and really kind of understand the edit too. And, you know, like I love like Brian De Palma. Have you ever seen like Blowout at all?
I haven't. So.
Oh man, it's a great freaking film. It's basically a slasher, but just like all the stuff he does with the cameras. So I think like horror is a very, you know, it's a great place to go, and I love horror too. So I think for me it was fun. I think like, again, going back to like, you know, I love like those 80s slashers because they took it seriously, you know, like, and so like you go to like Prom Night, all these films are taking the genre seriously. And I think where Scream came along was kind of at the right time for that film, but then now it's like you get a slasher film, they got to like target, you know, they have to dress it up so much with like, oh, it's a Back to the Future meets a slasher. Now it's a Wonderful Life meets this. I'm like, oh my God. I'm like, just give me, is it that hard? Just give me a psychopath in a mask chasing people at night, you know, like just give me that. Like I want the meat and potatoes thing. Just give me that thing. Just don't overcomplicate the shit.
I have to ask you, is there an It's a Wonderful Life slasher movie?
You didn't see that one? It's a Wonderful Knife. No. I think it's coming out now.
No.
I mean, I'm sure it's cool, but it's like, you know, like...
Well, like you said...
Sounds like the kind of thing we'll watch.
We probably will end up watching that, but...
I think it's a Blumhouse one or something like that, you know, but I don't know.
Maybe not then. So.
I think like, you know, like I liked Final Girls a lot, but I was always like, man, like they're doing... It's like, Final Girls is so good, but I felt like I would have loved to see more of like nighttime kind of scenes and stuff like that. And to me, I wanted this to go back to that thing. Like I didn't want it to just be, you know, like I wanted to have some fun, but the humor to be in the point of view of like that this is really happening. So a lot of the humor is kind of like part of the situation itself versus like, you know, like meta humor
it's
or
all
whatever.
in context.
Yeah. And then to still make it scary.
I think you make an interesting point though. Like you said, everything has to be kind of gussied up. You know, it can't just be straight. It's got to be, and going back to Scream and saying, you know, it did come at the right time because it was making fun of the genre, but also being a serious horror film at the same time, giving you the rules and Jamie Kennedy kind of kicking out all that stuff. Who kind of going back to that, were there specific directors that you took inspiration from for this movie?
Oh yeah, I would say Wes Craven for one, because I love his like female protagonists in his films a lot. Are very resourceful and very smart, and so I'd go back to obviously like, you know, Heather Langenkamp and Nightmare on Elm Street. She's tough. I mean, she's like setting booby traps up. I mean, she's going into the dream to fight him, to bring him back. She's very resourceful, and I wanted our girls and our women and our characters in our film to be strong and tough and not just shriek and run and fall over every last, you know, thing in the forest, you know. But so I think Lexi to me Lexi was a tough character because she does have PTSD, and when you meet her, she's in the kind of the tunnel, I call it, of PTSD, where you're in that kind of tunnel where you can't. I remember just being in some situations where someone might be talking to me or they'd be right next to me and I wouldn't even know for 10 minutes that they were talking to me, and they're like, dude, you listen to me? I'm like, huh? Like, oh, holy shit, I didn't even see you there. You know, kind of. So to go to those directors, I think Wes Craven is one. And then I like Jordan Peele a lot too for like the setups and payoffs he does, which I think are like, he's just got a great sense of humor. What I love with Jordan Peele, what he does is he always respects like that this is the character. So the character better react. Like, like sometimes I feel like in some of these movies, when you see the character, you're with them, and in the third act, they're like a completely different character, even though it's the same actor. You're like, where did this come from? The dude's like doing and shit or whatever.
So you just insert a new
so
actor in there.
Kind of looks like you're him. Like, what is? All of a sudden, he knows all these things. You're like, where? You should have known that like earlier in the film. What's going on here? And also was it Tom Holland who did Fright Night and all that stuff. So I love like a lot of those '80s movies. You know, where that's kind of like my biggest influences probably is those like Wes Craven and stuff, I think.
Speaking of the 80s, you have Tom Matthews in this movie, who's kind of a 80s legend, and I really dig that he's doing all these independent films. You got any good Tom Matthews stories from when he was around?
I mean, he's just really cool. I really liked him a lot. I'm excited because he's coming back for part 2 in a bigger. Nice. He'll have a much bigger role in part 2, which is exciting. And I think I love to work with actors who have kind of a film language, and I could like, and he's been doing this for a long time, so he could, so it was nice to talk with him and just work through some of the blocking and some of those things. And it's like when you work with really good actors. Yeah, I worked on a film called Brooklyn 45, and some of them they could just sit there in the chair when they're like, all right, we're getting ready to roll, and then they just like turn themselves on or whatever, and but it's cool. I think that's just the fun of it, is that they kind of have a naturalism to their performance, which is really nice. I think that's and I think this is the thing too, like you're talking earlier about like bad actors and stuff like that. And I think it's just like that they're like, we're all kind of honing our craft or whatever. We're getting, and so we're kind of cutting our teeth. And recently I was watching Halloween Kills and Halloween Ends, because one of the scenes was like, on paper, it's like, this is pretty cheesy. It's like, like they're just talking to the parents or whatever. And like everything that they're saying is cheesy. But I'm like, why does this not feel cheesy? And so I thought that was really interesting to think about. And I think it's like they have more coverage of a scene sometimes. They have better editors who are more experienced, who can make that scene pop. The actors are able to take like this corny line of dialogue, like the two cops who are talking about the banh mi sandwich. And then the guy's like your sandwich your lunch looks like something a 5-year-old would make or whatever. And that's, it's a corny scene, but it's like they do it in a way that's really great. So I think there's something to, when you're looking at like emerging filmmakers and emerging actors and stuff, it's like they are learning. And so I think it's like you're starting to see the pieces come together. And I saw a movie called Royal Tenenbaums that was like a Wes Anderson film. And there's a scene in it between like Gene Hackman and Angelica Houston where they're standing outside. And it's like this one continuous take that's just a static locked off shot. It goes on for so long. And I remember at one point it felt like the illusion broke, and I could tell they were acting. And it was so strange to me, where it's like Gene Hackman is not a bad actor, but the scene, the illusion broke. And it was so fascinating because like after each festival screening, I would go back and I'd recut the film, and I'd keep cutting scenes down and making things tighter. And sometimes like a line would overlap or this and that, or, just tighten these things up. And then it was like that the performance was there. So I think sometimes like what we consider bad acting is really just bad editing or whatever, or just that, not necessarily bad editing, but just loose editing. So it's almost too loose, where if you start to tighten it up, then it's popping, like there's many scenes that I cut off like a couple lines at the top of it and at the end of it. So they always say like, was it arrive late and leave early kind of a thing with your edits and with your scenes. So I think, there was just, it went through a lot of iterations, but I think that's probably the thing when we look at films. So I think sometimes I would try to look at like films that like my friends have made. I'm like, okay, like I see what they're doing, and it's probably just like a sense of the scene's playing a little bit too long, and you can tell, I'm sure, when you're like, oh, the scene's going on forever. And I have ADD, so for me, I'm like, oh shit, we got to get out of this thing, But anyway,
where's the trap door?
Are we still at the cabin? Oh my god, we got to get out of this dining hall. Oh my god. So anyway. And it was funny, actually, you mentioned another one. Night of the Living Dead was a big influence on this film, too, because the dining hall basically, to me, was like the farmhouse a bit,
Okay.
And so if you think about it, like they're always kind of in the dining hall a bit. and they go out to try to get people to come back or whatever. And then eventually it's like kind of like eventually the zombies go into the farmhouse. Eventually the killer comes into the dining hall, and then there is no safe space at all. So I felt like, so that was kind of a big influence as well, was Night of the Living Dead.
Well, they use it as like a meeting place, right? And that's where they go out and they explore and come back with the recon that they've made. Oh, hey, have you found, this person? Have you found this? That? They come back to that. Yeah. So like you said, when the killer comes in there, whoosh, can't come here anymore.
Yeah,
it's not ours.
You're screwed.
Yeah, it's like a safe house or something is not so safe anymore.
Yeah, and there's just like little happy accidents that would happen. I remember, like it's funny, like when you make your film, you half the time I feel like you're just trying to, you're just there. When I would watch it with the audience, which I always hated because it just made me anxious for like 8 minutes. Was like you're just hoping that it slides by and no one notices all of the gaping holes in your film. Like where did the axe come from, and how did she know that it was in his chest and all that stuff? But sometimes I think it's like decisions you make when you have hypothermia aren't probably like the most
not always
ones.
The best, huh?
Oh yeah, I'm like, where did they go? They were not in the thing, Some guy, like we played in the Philippines, and somebody in the Philippines got in this terrible argument with me about how like this movie sucks. What a piece of shit! I can't believe that she would leave a perfectly good running sheriff's truck. And I was like, yeah, that's true.
What were some of the places that you took the film to that you like didn't expect to go? I mean, I'm sure you didn't expect to go to the Philippines and
no, not at all. That was incredible. Yeah. Oh my God. Yeah. I think Popcorn Frights was a great place. We had I had a terrible screening because the sound was. I screwed up the DCP, and so the sound was terrible, and so that I had an 82-minute panic attack, and I think I never got over that. But we went, like Days of the Dead are really is just a great bunch of people that run that. George and Audrey and Duke and all those guys are just really wonderful. Angie, and then everybody like Jay at the Horror Hound are great too. Like I think my favorite festivals to go to are like more of the horror con / horror film festivals, because I feel like I went to a couple of film festivals where you can feel a little pretentious or whatever, and it's like, oh my God, get me out of this place. I just want to talk about like Final Exam or something with somebody, and everybody's like, you can kind of tell when you're in that like the Velvet Rope kind of place. I'm like, I gotta get out of here, man. But
got to get with your people.
I know, I feel more comfortable talking, like at a film convention or horror convention, talking to people about stuff than that at some kind of, pretentious highbrow kind of thing or whatever. No, and then, there were some really great, like I went to Wreak Havoc in South Carolina. It was great. I felt like I went to a movie theater that was like from 1985. So it was like the coolest. And the people there were great. A lot of people that were from like the kind of Chapel Hill. It is in North Carolina. So a lot of people who like had actually worked on a lot of the Halloween movies like came out. And so it was just a cool time talking with them. I think my favorite thing about it is just meeting other filmmakers. I think my favorite was probably we did a drive-in not too far from Champaign, and we played opposite of Halloween Ends on like the opening night of Halloween Ends. I thought we were going to get like blown out. So I was like scared to death. And we actually did more business than Halloween Ends. So I was like, this is the only time I'll ever get to say that we outsold Halloween Ends in my life. And then we drove, and then on the flip side of that was funny. We drove out and we played at Smodcastle, which was Kevin Smith's theater out in Atlantic Highlands, New Jersey, to like one other dude.
Oh, really?
I mean, yeah, so that was cool. It was, I was, like I was in bands in my 20s, and I always feel like it's good to keep that perspective on things, because I've driven like hours to play. I remember one time we played in like Denton, Texas, and we had to be in El Paso the next day, and that's like a 13-hour drive straight there. So we like basically like loaded out into the van and just drove straight to the gig all night. And then we get there, and the band was called the Firebird Band, and they had us listed as like the Thunderbirds or something. I was like, dude, we just drove through all of Texas just to have the wrong name on the venue. And then I think we went to Juarez that night, and I might have accidentally got this guy to jump over with us, but that's another story. I thought he was from Florida, so it was my fault. But anyway, so but no, it's just but it was cool to meet Kevin Smith, and that was pretty cool. And he's like, oh, dude, I'm sorry more people didn't come up. And he's like, dude, it's all good, man. I played to the bartender a bunch of times, and he's been in that exact same place too. And so I recently read a really great listen to a Q&A with him where he was talking about like, bad reviews and stuff. And so that really, really meant a lot to me. I don't know. It's just, I think just making a film is such a miracle. And so to be here at all, it's exciting. Like even with that dude in the Philippines who was like freaking out about how she didn't, and it's funny to me. Like, I don't know if you ever seen Pitch Meeting at all, this YouTube channel called Pitch Meeting.
Yeah.
Have you seen it?
Yeah. I've seen it quite a few times.
I did.
Watched it religiously for a while there. So.
Oh, I love it so much. He's like, he's like, I'm just going to need to get way up off my back about that one right there. Like that. Yeah.
Is that where the guy like talks? He does both sides. Okay. I have seen that. Okay.
It's really.
Yeah.
And he says, well, what do you mean? Was it, well, because the movie has to happen. He's like, oh yeah, the movie has to happen. And so so I think it's like, so it's funny sometimes to listen to people talk about like what they would have done. I'm like, yeah, but then the movie wouldn't have happened, And so I think for me, what was exciting in his like hateful, like negative review of the film was like, I could see like that he was identifying with the person in the film and he wanted them to do the thing that he wanted them to do. And I think to me, even if he's like, this bullshit and she didn't do the thing, it kind of made me feel like you did this miracle, which is that you were able to relate to the character in this film, even if you didn't like it or whatever, it's like you were able to relate, which I think was just such a huge, I mean, that's the best thing we can do.
With something like that, at least he took the time to pay attention to and watch the film.
Was passionate about it.
Or like,
could have been
we have a running gag on our show where we take a third-party review off of Rotten Tomatoes, and usually they're so like ridiculous. That's why we include them, because they're just really dumb. Like, this is the worst movie ever. 5 stars out of 5 or something like that. So,
it's the best movie, 1 star.
Right. So the fact that, I mean, pissed off or not, like the fact that he took the time to actually kind of pull that much out of it, at least he gave it the time and paid attention to it. So
no, I kind of love that. I mean, I think to me it's just like, to me, anybody who goes to see the film, it's just exciting that you saw it at all, because I think again, to go back to the miracle of indie film, it's the first miracle is that you finish your film at all, and then the second miracle, which I would say is debatable, is to get distribution. I don't know if that's a miracle or if it's just like you sign yourself up for indentured servitude or something like that. But then, and then the final miracle is just that that people watched your film, And so to me, it's just it's amazing at all. And there's so many films that are out there that aren't watched or whatever. So to me, it's just it's such a cool thing. And so that's why like we did a couple of nights in town, like at a multiplex, like this Savoy 16, and I went the first night and I was like, I should probably go every night actually, because I feel like if someone's there, I should be there with them, because they showed up, So I would do like funny gags where I would dress up like the guy telling the story at the beginning of the film, and so I like walk in at the end, and all these kids like turn around like, oh my god, like you're the dude, and then I didn't want to like wear the mask because I didn't want to freak people out. But it was pretty cool. And I would do like poster giveaways and stuff to people that came out. Because it just, to me, it's like, this is such a miracle that we're here at all. It's amazing that people come up at all, and so it's kind of wonderful. So to me, it's just been exciting, I think, to like take everybody's feedback, listen to it, good reviews, bad reviews, and just think about how we can make the second one even better, and just hit it more. And it's funny, like with the blood thing, because I was really more going for like the Halloween 1978 level of blood, which is like there's really not much of any blood in the film. But, so I just remember like that was like the main criticism, I think. I'm like, well, that's not a big hurdle to jump over, I think, for part 2. And I've got a really good friend who's done a lot of like makeup effects and practical effects for Shudder films. So he's coming on to do a lot of our blood gags and creative kills and stuff for part 2. So that's really exciting. So I feel like that'll be a place where we can level up. And then I'm doing a lot more like Steadicam and stuff too, because I want to do more of that Halloween feel. Like some of the times we had like it's called a Dana dolly, but it's like this 10-foot like dolly thing or whatever. And we had 10-foot rails. And so that's why sometimes I was walking through the forest, they were kind of walking slow because we'd run out of track. So we'd be, they'd be kind of going slow because if they went too fast, we'd be like, we got to move in this damn thing. So, it was just, anyway, it's just such a miracle that we're here at all. And it's amazing to me just that that me and you that we're all talking on at all too. So that's exciting. But,
How far along is two? Is the script done and you're like pre-production, or is it not that far yet?
Yeah, we're in pre-production right now. So I've got I kind of like take a lot of time with the story. So I really just wanted to kind of break the story first. And I had a couple of iterations, but then like just this past week was finally like, okay, like everything clicks now in a way that's really fun and emotionally powerful. And then everything kind of makes sense too. And so then I've been going to the location, and we've been starting to do a lot of camera tests too. So I think we've been testing out a lot of like different ideas for the next one too. Like the Gareth Edwards, the creator, has been a big influence on this one. With how he shot that film is how I want to shoot the next one, which much more fluid, much more like a smaller crew. Because I had like 19 crew in this one. It was just way too many people to kind of navigate. And so this one is like tighter crew, tighter knit, do more with less. The cameras are able to shoot at a higher ISO, so we need less light. And then kind of the world of part two is interesting because it's in this kind of downtown area so we kind of leave the camp and we go into this kind of 1993 college music scene of a college town kind of a thing. And that's kind of where my era came from, was like 1993. I was like seeing tons of bands and listening to the Smashing Pumpkins and Pearl Jam and Nine Inch Nails and Alice in Chains and stuff like that. So that's kind of the world of this one, and like record stores and bands and stuff like that. And so I think it'll have much more of my personality in the next one, which is exciting. But sorry, I might have missed your question there.
No, just how far you were. You
yeah. So yeah. So basically, we shot a sizzle reel for the teaser trailer for it, and so that'll probably launch with Indiegogo. I was crazy and thinking I was gonna do it in like October. I was like, I need some time off because I was so fried. Because basically our distributor was like, oh, by the way, your film comes out tomorrow in the U.S. I was like, what? So, I was so fried after that. I needed a second to like think.
Yeah, get a breath of air.
Oh my God. And I'm ADD, so I'll get myself into a jam where I'm like, oh yeah, we're gonna do part two. And everybody's like, really? I'm like, oh yeah, shit. so I think it was one of those things where I needed to make sure that the story was good. But yeah, Tom is coming back, Bishop is coming back. There's two other people from the Friday the 13th franchise that are coming in. And
right on.
I'm really excited for the story. I think that it's a darker story. So I go back to like my favorite sequel of all time is Empire Strikes Back. So I feel like that's kind of the feel I'm going for this one, So it's like the heroes are not exactly, winning at the end of the day. But I think to me, it's just much more emotionally powerful. And I think it'll be interesting. Like, to me, it's like everything that you see in part one, there are things that are calling back to that and sometimes even giving it much more importance. So there might be one scene that we will see from a completely different angle that's now it's going to give much more like understanding like what was happening or whatever. I think the beauty of sometimes having characters that you don't know that much about is now like that's kind of a playground to create deeper characters in part two, because the audience doesn't know everything about this one person or that person. So it's been fun. But I'm excited. I think like there's going to be a lot of like really cool set pieces that I'm really excited to do. So I would say right now, there's elements of like, in terms of influence for part two, I'd say like The Departed, Seven, Scream, and maybe like High Fidelity or something like that, or maybe more like I would say like Decline of Western Civilization. Like if you ever see that punk documentary,
oh yeah,
probably more.
Yeah,
I feel that's
quite the
more
combination of films there.
Yeah. And so, yeah, I think, but just darker. I think moodier is exciting to me. But yeah, I'm excited because basically everybody. I'm excited to basically just take everybody and just really run them through the gauntlet on this one. Like like the smiling happy people at the end of the part one is not going to be smiling happy at the end of part two. but it's not that we're going to go to more. I think I'll bring more gore, more violence, more blood. But I don't know that I'm not thinking about it like Terrifier level gore or whatever. Which I think is like, who could possibly top that? So and that's their thing. I think
it's kind of a calling card.
Yeah.
Are there plans for it to be a trilogy or open-ended?
I think part two is going to be
okay.
So I would say like this is the how we approach. So what how I approached part one was like, if I only ever make a film, it's going to be this film. And I wanted to see a film that to me was like the most fun roller coaster version of a Friday the 13th summer camp slasher kind of film. Because I felt like some of those movies are kind of slow. And so now I was just talking to my friend today because my gaffer, we were working on this commercial today. I was like, part two is going to be like, if we only ever make one horror film ever again, let's make it like this, you know? And so I think, so that's really fun to me because it's like, let's just go all out on making it the best horror film we can make. And I think, you know, it's funny. I was fighting all sorts of like things early on with the first one. Like some people were like, I think you should only have like 2 people die. I'm like, have you ever seen a slasher movie before? 2 people die? Like the people will riot. So imagine that movie, you know, if I made that one, you know? And so I think now having been through like the horror film festivals and been around way more horror fans. And sometimes it's great too. Cause like, you know, I can tell like people care about the film and they want to see us elevate it more. And so sometimes people will be like, oh dude, I got some ideas for like a kill. And I love that. Cause I feel like that's not people like dumping on it. It's more like they want to see it come to a better place. And I'm the same way too. And so I think, you know, it's just going to be, I'm excited. I think it's going to be a little bit more self-contained, but I'm very excited for where it's going to go, and really just like taking all the lessons that we learned in part one and really just hitting it on this one. So I think just the tension just ratcheted up. Like, oh yeah, like high tension. I think it was another kind of you know, influence on the part two. Not necessarily with like the twist where you're like, wait a second, what? You know, but like, you know, at least. Not the bookshelf decapitation, but I think some of those other scenes with the throat slicing and stuff is bringing those pieces to this one. But anyway, I could talk about this all night, I guess. So yeah.
Well, we've kept you for over an hour. Do you got time for one more question, and then we'll let you know,
totally
relax after your day? So this one's a little more off topic, but basically, what's coming up in horror or otherwise that you're looking forward to? What kind of things are on your radar right now?
Let's see. I don't know. Man, I don't know. I've been excited for getting this creator Blu-ray to come in so I can watch it in my studio theater at my house or whatever. I don't know. I feel like I've been so like focused on this one thing forever, but I feel like I've missed a lot of like, I need to see Oppenheimer. I haven't seen that yet. Have you guys seen that?
No, not yet.
No, I don't have 3 hours to devote to Christopher
Nolan
right now.
Have to find it.
Oh yeah. He's all practical, you know. No, I don't know. I think for me, I'm excited to like, you know, I haven't gotten paid yet from the first one. So I'm excited to get that money so we can start doing tests. I think I'm really just excited to start doing actual tests. Continue to watch. I don't know what other movies are coming up. You know, trying to think.
What other movies are coming up? Well, you got Thanksgiving coming out in this week. I still saw. Did you see Grindhouse in the theater? Oh yeah, and that's with all due respect to Eli Roth, I don't like how this trailer gives you like not much confidence in it, but I'll still give it a try. I'm like, why does it look so good? Like, yeah.
I love the leaning into the Grindhouse kind of thing. You know, and so I feel like if they would have, you know, I don't want to be that dude because I get sick of that dude now because I have to temper myself, you know, because I lean into that like, I don't know, why do they do? I'm like, I'm doing the thing that I don't like, so I'll shut up. But like,
well, my big thing is always trying to let the movie like come out and watch it before I decide if I'm going to be mad at it or not. But
if you get pre-mad at the movie before you ever see it, like this is bullshit. Like.
There's plenty of movies that come out that come out and I think, well, this is bullshit. I have no interest in that, but I don't sit there and complain about it. I just choose not to watch it and go do something else. But I think the thing with Thanksgiving, at least for me, like you mentioned seeing Grindhouse. So in Ferndale, there was a theater that did a brew and view thing on Wednesday. So you could go see a movie for $5. It was like a second run theater basically. And we went and saw Grindhouse, I think 12 times, like 12 weeks in a row there, just because it was $5. So we just kept going and seeing it again. So I really fell in love with the idea of the Thanksgiving slasher movie based off that little like what minute clip in the middle of the movie. So seeing the trailer now, and it's not just what's in that like initial teaser, I guess I'm like, oh well, that's kind of a bummer. So,
Right. Yeah.
but again, I haven't seen it yet, so I can't really accurately say anything. So.
That the teaser to me was it kind of gives you, it's like that Blood Rage feel, you know, like you see in Blood Rage. Like I love that movie. It's like those early 80s slashers, like the regional ones, like Death Screams and stuff, where like it's very grainy, it's very, you know, kind of corny, very raw. And I love that. And I love like, you know, I remember seeing like Tom McLaughlin, his film One Dark Night, and the digital transfer, like if you watch on Amazon, it still has like the cigarette burns, like the real changes in the corner. And I love just that film grain feel to it, you know, like where like even to go to Grindhouse where like they were missing that third reel or whatever, you know, and then he's like, well, if I would have known that you were, you know, like the dude, I would have never, you know, I love that stuff. And and I feel like that's the thing with, to go to the modern horror films, I feel like horror films should have dirt, should have grit in them. You know, it's like the difference between like Blade Runner and like Blade Runner 2049, which is like antiseptically clean. Or like I always had a problem with like the early 2000 slasher films, like because it was like the cast of CW. Yeah, everybody's like beyond beautiful. The dudes were like, you know.
Yeah, I don't remember what movie we were talking about recently, but I think I went on a 5-minute like bitch fest about like how clean this room was. I was like, why is this like the most pristine building since like the movie Tron or something? So,
well, even Tron had grain. Right.
Oh yeah, that's true. And then the second one was like totally different.
Super slick, too clean. But it's in a computer. I mean, I guess it makes sense.
Yeah. So I think that's the thing, and I think that's what I liked with our film was like it kind of like we kind of fell backwards into it a little bit. Was like the anamorphic lenses are pretty soft anyways, and we were shooting kind of below where you would normally want to be, and so they're even more soft. And so it was just interesting because I watched Halloween and then I watched ours, and I was like, oh, this is basically the same kind of softness in it or whatever. But I think for modern audiences, they might get a little freaked out because it's not like super clinically sharp like a lot of movies are. But I feel like for horror, I think you have to have that texture. You have to have that feel, the grit, the raw, the dirt, you know, because then it feels more immediate. It feels like you can touch it.
You're so conditioned with movies these days being digital, you know, they don't have that softness to it. So when you see something that's different from that, it can be very jarring. You know, you're like, what am I looking at here? And especially if you're not familiar with anamorphic in general, you know, you're like, why are the corners so soft? Why is the edging, you know, if it's not dead center in the middle.
Oh, it's like I feel like we're stuck with and then to go to like the camera bros or whatever, like all these YouTube guys are always like, oh yeah, you need to see the thing on the sides. I'm like, that's literally what the lens is doing.
We want corner to corner sharpness.
Oh my God, shut up. Like when I went to see the creator and I loved it because I could see that the imperfections. In fact, the creator to me was like the most film-like film I've seen in years. Like I felt like I was watching an actual, like it was shot on a Panavision Panaflex. And I love that on the edges. And I was really paying attention to, I've seen it like 3 times just to see in the theater. Cause I went to see it myself and then I brought my gaffer and some other film crew to see it. Like, all right, I've got to watch the thing. And I was just seeing
like the only ones looking at the corner of the screen. Everybody else like, look at that cool thing. The kid with the head missing the thing.
To see the fall off. But it was like, I think it's like that is what makes it have character. And my friend Rob, who shoots films for Shudder, it's like he's going for character. He's not going for this digital cleanliness, sharpness, or whatever. He wants the thing to feel something, you know. And I think that's and I think modern audiences, it's like they're just so used to that thing. And I don't know how many times, like to me, it's like I feel like for Final Summer, the fun of it is watching in the dark and a big screen, crank the sound up. So if you're watching on your iPhone, I'm like, forget it, dude. Like,
I don't understand how people watch movies on phones at all. Like, it doesn't. It's bad enough watching like a YouTube clip on a phone, but the idea of trying to watch a whole film on a phone, I'd rather just wait till I get home.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like horror to me, it's like you got to watch it in the dark. You got to turn it like loud as hell. you gotta get some beers or some other things, and you gotta watch it with your friends so you can like yell at the screen. You're like, "Get the hell! What are you doing? Oh my god!" Oh, and then that kind of stuff. So I feel like horror should, maybe that makes sense why horror is such a great community, because to me it's like it's best when you're watching with your friends. So it has that communal thing versus. Although sometimes it can be really good when you're watching by yourself and you're like, oh shit, I gotta go upstairs now.
The light switch is all the way over there.
Oh my god. I used to fall asleep. I would fall asleep to like The Exorcist, Blu-ray or whatever, and then go back to like the menu screen and be like, nah, and you'd be like passed out. And then I was like, nah, like 3.
I had a roommate that hated me because I had this old like Robotech DVD in my computer in my room. Yeah. And I fell asleep to it, and the menu music came on. I was so out of it, I didn't hear it. And their room was next door, and the next morning, they're like, you can't do that anymore. You got to wear headphones, because that's all. It kept me up. That's all I heard all night. It's like, oh, I'm sorry, dude.
Yeah, I love that show. That was great, man. Yeah. I was like Voltron too, but you're always like, going back to like the annoying, the annoying critics are like, can they just form Voltron already? I've seen like 87 episodes of Voltron.
They're just going to do it anyways. Just do it from the beginning.
This will be like 20 minutes, like a 20-second battle. Fucking Voltron it up, and then we're done. It
would be funny to see that one episode where they just Voltron right from the beginning, and then they're just going and eating a pizza and like watching
each other,
Seinfeld or something. Books. Yeah,
but the episode had to happen. So. Right. Anyway, so cool.
Well, John, we've had a blast having you on. Can you take a second and plug everywhere? Do you want to plug everywhere where people can get Final Summer, where they can watch it? Sure. Where, I mean, I can guess, but I think you might have a better ear on it than we do. So,
yeah, I don't know. We just sold to some distributor the other day, and I have no idea who they are. So, I'm like, okay. But like, can you sign this form? I'm like, sure. All right, here we go. We're on we're on Amazon, Google Play, iTunes. I think we're like Sky in the UK, a bunch of Redbox, a bunch of other places. I know we're pirated right now too, which is really exciting, but don't mention that. But rat bastards, so we're pirating it, just show up for the Indiegogo. We'll call it even, but no, and then I think right now we're just in the US and UK, and then apparently we're on the Dodgy Box in Australia, which is their vernacular for the pirate.
Oh, okay. I was going to say, is that slang for some kind of pirate thing?
I think so.
You've made it big time when people are pirating your movie.
Yeah. Hell yeah. Yeah. So I was like, I guess I can't take it as a bad thing. I'm like, oh, people are... Maybe they picked up a couple viruses in the meantime. But,
maybe they'll buy a shirt.
Right.
Yeah, buy a shirt or something. I'll feel better. But and then we'll see what's happening. And then we'll have a physical media coming with the Blu-rays. So we could, or with the Indiegogo. So you'll have DVDs and Blu-rays. So the Blu-ray will have the 2.0, the 5.1, and then I have this kind of ridiculous 3D version of the film too in stereo. So. And mainly it's just kind of a gag for me because I like watching movies with like 3D glass. Like I've got my 3D glasses in the background there, and there's this kind of a program that would just 3D your film or whatever, and I watched it. I was like, kind of works, I was a total gag. I was like, well, let's just do a 3D version of the film for, for the hell of it, and because I think to me I just love having the glasses on. Watching in the dark, it calls back to the 80s, and to me it's like it makes it even more of an 80s film is when you're watching it in that anaglyph kind of 3D.
It's like watching Hondo.
I could talk about Hondo.
Do you remember when they put that in 3D? That was here in the Detroit area. They put it on one of the syndicated networks. It wasn't actually a network, but just a local thing. And they advertised that thing for weeks. John Wayne's Hondo. And they had the glasses at Kroger or one of the grocery stores or whatever you can get with the thing.
Oh my God.
It was like this big deal. And
Al Bundy's favorite John Wayne movie.
You watch the thing and it's like, oh, it's still Hondo. I mean, it's 3D, but it's still Hondo. So you take what you can get.
But I still love I go to Amityville 3D and then Jaws 3D are probably my kind of pinnacle, 3D experiences. But
Hondo's not on there.
Yeah, no, I guess not Honda. I don't know. Sorry. Maybe I'll look at it like Shane in 3D or like McClintock or something like that.
Pick it up.
I don't know. Yeah. But well, cool, guys. Well, thank you guys so much, and feel free to reach out anytime. It's fun.
Yeah.
I'm talking, and I think I'm probably planning on launching the Indiegogo for part 2 in January, so there'll be some stuff there.
Yeah,
but,
let us know. We'll push it out.
Yeah,
absolutely. So,
well, thank you guys so much, man. Good talking to you all, and
yeah.
Thanks, John.
Have a great one.
See you. All right, so that was John Isberg, director, writer, man about town, Final Summer.
Make sure to check out Final Summer. Go pick up the movie, buy it physical, stream it, whatever you got to do. But check this movie out. It's good to support indie horror. It's good to support independent filmmakers. And John's a great guy. We're glad that we got to have him on. Make sure to follow them at Final Summer Movie. That's the best place to keep up on their upcoming Indiegogo campaign, as well as whatever else is going on with Final Summer. In the meantime, if you want to, we'd also love if you would take the time to follow us. We are at Dewey Podmonster on all the social platforms. And of course, you can go to our website at crap.town. And Sean, what do you got going on? What would you like people to share and look at and other good stuff?
Nothing. But if you want to follow my Michigan beer adventures, you can find it at Draft Therapy on all the social platforms or youtube.drafttherapy.com. It'll take you directly to my YouTube channel where you can subscribe, you can watch, you can imbibe.
All right, guys, we'll be back next week with the usual shtick and talk to you soon. Have a good one. Cheers.